What's happening, rock and rollers? My name's Doc, and I can't leave well enough alone. Today we're going to talk about the ROCKBAND microphone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to turn one of these into an adapter so you can plug in any professional quality microphone that has a 1/4 mono output and does not require phantom power. I really like the Shure PG48 microphone. It's a workhorse mic. It's not fancy. It's not bottom of the barrel. This is a professional quality microphone that can take anything that you can dish out or any of your buddies at your parties. So I won't go into a whole lot of details on that, but just make sure you don't go out and buy yourself a mic that requires phantom power and expect it to work with this. It's not going to hurt anything, it's just not going to work. Let's go ahead and look at the parts we're going to need and the tools we're going to use. Okay, first let's talk about what you absolutely have to have. You have to have a ROCKBAND microphone. It can be a Guitar Hero microphone, it can be one of the Konami branded microphones. Ultimately, these are all just OEM Logitech Vantage USB microphones. You have to have a soldering iron. You can't crimp audio connections. You can't twist and wire net audio connections. You can, but they're going to sound crappy. If they don't sound crappy right away, they're going to get used and they're going to sound crappy. Trust me on this. I wanted to bring up a new modding term that I learned this morning, and that's MIRR. M-I-R-R. Make it reliable and robust. I want to throw mad props out to Jeff on my forum, Jay Grills, he goes by. That guy came up with that, I think, just this morning, and I like it. I'm going to use it a lot. Okay, so we've got our microphone, we've got our soldering iron. We need something that will cut wire. I like to use wire cutters. Call me crazy. A pair of wire strippers. They don't have to be fancy whiz-bang wire strippers. They can be plain old, generic, single size, one size fits all wire cutters. A pair of needle nose pliers. Always handy. You're also going to need some of these 1/4 inch inline mono phone jacks. Step 1. ROCKBAND microphone. You want to locate the USB to microphone translator box. And that's basically that little guy right there. Now, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your wire cutters and you want to cut the cord. Give yourself plenty of room. What do we got there? About yay. Cut that off. Take this part here. Gonzo. This is what we're after. This is the smarts. This is the brains of the operation. Open up your mono connectors. It's going to look like this. The inside unscrews, showing you that there's a little housing, and then there's the actual part that does the signal connections. Okay, then you're going to want to take just the housing part that you had, and you're going to kind of use that as a guide for how long you want your wire to be. Cut that off. About the same length as your housing. Can you see that? I'm going to go ahead and cut that off at roughly the same length there. It really isn't super critical. Better to be too long than too short. After you've done that, you're going to go ahead and we want to strip the end here. Don't strip off too much. It's a rookie mistake people make is that they strip off 2 inches of wire. There's no possible reason to do that, and you just end up with a bunch of exposed wire that you're not going to be able to deal with other than having to go in and put more heat shrink on it or other insulation. You'll notice that this has a copper outer wiring, which are little thin wires. They're basically an entire sheath around the wire, and then a white inner wire. What you can do is just go ahead and separate all the copper wires, kind of gently pull them around so that they're all kind of on one side like that. Once you've got them all over to one side like that, give them a little twist, and all of a sudden that bundle of copper fibers is now a wire ready to be soldered. Go ahead and strip the white housing off that white wire. Just a little right at the tip. And you'll end up with something that looks like that. Now what you want to do is tin your wires. I don't want to get too in-depth on soldering, but one of the most critical things you do is tin the parts. And what tinning means is you're going to pre-apply solder to these parts. And you're going to be nowhere near the part you're soldering it to. You're literally just going to make the tips of these silver. You do the same thing with your connector. It's even more important on the connector side because, as you can see, most of this is made of plastic. And by applying too much heat here, you're going to melt it here. So by tinning this first, I'm able to get a good little blob of solder on my two little connection parts. So that's ready to go. Now I'll tin the wire end. And I'm using my extra hand tool here. This is optional, but it really makes short work of stuff like this. Grab your soldering iron. Make sure you got a nice clean tip. I like to use this tip cleaner and tinner. Does the soldering iron up right, gets it ready to go right away. Take your solder. For stuff like this where I'm mixing and matching kind of connectors and wires of fairly unknown origins, I'll always use a fine rosin core solder. What that means is that there's a flux inside this solder, basically an acid, which will eat away any corrosion or contaminants as I'm trying to get this to flow into my parts. It makes for a better connection. You want to put your soldering iron on the part. You don't melt a bunch of solder onto your soldering iron and then try to get the blob on there. You warm up your part, and you'll be able to tell when it's ready because the solder will start to flow directly into the wire, and it will turn it silver. I tend to over tin a bit, but I hate having to go back and try to get something to stick that won't stick. Same thing on the white wire. Feel solder build up. I just like to flick it off like that. It's also why I solder standing up. I never solder sitting down. What a silly thing to say, right? Well, if I'm going to drip solder, I'd much rather drip onto my toes than into my lap. That's probably self-explanatory. So, there we go. We've got our tinned wires. We've got our tin connector. Now we put, no we don't. Don't forget. We need to put this guy on here. If we don't put this guy on here now, he's not going to go on there later. And I know what you're thinking. Which one goes where? Well, it does matter. The copper outer wire is the sleeve. The white inner wire is the tip. If they're reversed, they will not work. When you're looking at a connector like this, the strain relief, that's this little guy here, and I'll show you what that does in a little bit. That's your sleeve. The little guy on the side, that's your tip. And what that means is the tip of this connector contacts that contact once it's inside this housing. And the sleeve here, contacts the whole inner sleeve of the device when this is slid in there. See how durable these are? Okay, now we're going to assemble our adapter. Go ahead and slide that all the way on. Then push it right up past the little flex housing there. See how tidy that is? Now we're going to take our mono input jack. I'm going to go ahead and put that into the strain relief, which is this little clamp here. And what that does is it gives you a place to crimp the cord itself in this, so when somebody pulls on this, you're not pulling on your solder joints, you're pulling on this metal clamp which has been crimped around the outer insulation of your cable. So I've soldered on the sleeve side. See, I got a nice shiny silver connection. When you solder correctly, you end up with a nice shiny blob of metal. So now I'm crimping down the strain relief. So then you end up with that. Now I'm going to go ahead and position my tip wire where it goes and make that solder connection. That's all it takes when everything is tinned properly. You touch it, the two tinned parts flow together and you end up with a very, very strong connection. So we got. Now go ahead and slide your housing up. And there you have it. You're ready to rock with any professional microphone out there that can output to 1/4 mono and doesn't take phantom power.